Hello, this is Simon again from HOFA-College. Looking forward to this workshop actually, because it's the first time that we're going to talk about harmony theory basics in English language. So I hope you don't mind that this workshop is gonna take place in English. So I'll do my very best again, because it's quite difficult and there are some major differences regarding terms of harmonic theory structures and its terms itself. So yeah, but as mentioned, I'll do my very best, and I'll do it kind of different today, because in the past we usually had a typical PowerPoint presentation and we started with the very basics and then we ended with some harmony and some functional theory. But today we splitted the workshop in two parts. So it's the first part for YouTube for everyone in the world, and the second part, where we are going to talk about some details, is only available for students of our HOFA-College. And everything that you are going to see and going to hear as well is part of our short course, Harmony Theory. It's part of HOFA-College. It's also part of our diploma, if you like to take our diploma course, including the basic, the pro course, and as well as some short courses. This one is actually part of it, and yeah. So maybe you're interested in joining us, or maybe you are part of the program, then everything that you're going to see is, or almost everything, because I usually tend to bring in some new songs, some old songs that may differ from the usual structures that we had last time or that we do have in the course. But almost everything that you're going to see is part of the course, including the graphics, including the sheet music, including the examples as well, because there are actually some functional theory, and yeah, that's what we're going to take a look at today. So before we start with some tracks, I would like to say something about this workshop, because it has a really modern approach. You can also have a more classical based approach on how to deal with things, because almost everything comes from the classical music, from Bach to Beethoven and all these composers. But we could also start with Gregorian music as well, but I think that would go back too far. So we're doing a little bit of a classical approach, but also the more modern side of things. So and this workshop is based on something that's quite important in the world of music and music theory. It's the so-called root tone series. So I hope you can see this little keyboard. It's actually equal to a usual piano, whether it's an upright or a real piano, a full grand or something like that, and or a keyboard. So it doesn't matter if it has 25 keys or 88 keys. It's almost the same like every other instrument that has a keyboard on it. So we do have some basic notes and tones reaching from the C again to the C, and if we go up 2 octaves, we still have the C once again. And there are some white keys, there are some black keys, obviously. I guess everyone knows this, so doesn't need to mention it in particular. But there are some differences if we look at the white keys and the black keys, because if we take a closer look at some of the white keys, there are some black keys in between. For example, between the C and the D, we have a C sharp or a D flat. But if we take a look at the E and the F, there isn't a black key. So that being said, there might be something different going on here. And this is due to the actual notes that can be played. And the root tone series just consists of the white keys in particular, because we can build one of our most famous scales, which is the so-called major scale, for example. If we start with tone C and end with our tone C, we will have 8 keys in between, 8 notes, and these build up the classical major scale. And there's a reason why this is happening like that. If we follow this structure, we will see that there is no black key between E and F, and no black key between the B and the C. So there's something different going on, as mentioned before. And that is because there is no black key, so it's a semitone step. Each key that we have here, for example, between the F and the G and the A and the B, there is a whole tone step, but between these two places in particular, there is no black key, so we have a semitone step. And this leads us to maybe a question, why is this happening? This is because our root tone series is, let's say, maybe the mothership of them all, because we can derive the whole major scale, but we can also say something about the minor scale. And let's take a look at this in particular, so that you believe what I'm saying here. So, the scales, where are we? There is a major scale. It looks like that. Hope you can all see it. And as mentioned before, we have a semitone step between E and F and between B and C. So if we divide these notes into steps, which is what we usually do in musical theory, then we can say, okay, let's start from step 1 until step 8, and step 8 is equal to step 1 again. So if we do it like that, we have a semitone step between step 3 and 4 and between step 7 and 8. And this is the classical major scale. So, to give you an example, it sounds like that. No big deal, this is the classic C major scale. And as mentioned before, we have a semitone step between E and F and between B and C. So if we keep that in mind, and if we divide our scale into different steps, we can say a major scale always has its semitone steps between steps 3 and 4 and 7 and 8. And there's something special about the 7th step, because as you can see, it's highlighted in a mellow orange. And the 7th step of each major scale is the so-called leading note or leading tone. In German, you would say it's the Leittone, because it leads to the root tone. Usually you have a root tone or a root note, which is the basis of our scale, because you need to start somewhere. And if I say, okay, let's do a scale for maybe C, so if I have the C major scale, so I need to start at C, and this is my root note. But the 7th step, so the 7th note from my root note, which is C, is the so-called leading note or leading tone, because it leads back to our root note, because there is something like an acoustic proximity effect. And I can give you an example. If I play it again. So, as your hearing might tell you, it's not finished yet. But if I do it like that, it's all over, everything is good, everybody is happy. So this is the acoustic proximity effect of our leading note, and that's why we shouldn't end with the leading note and always resolve the whole thing with our basic root note, which was the C. I could also do this from another scale, so if we go back to give you an example to our root tone series. So here it is once again. So how about starting from the D, and we have to follow the same principle. So if I start from the D, I can see, oh, there are semitone steps as well, but they are between 2 and 3, and again between 6 and 7. So this is a kind of different scale. It's not the major scale, and therefore my accidentals, which can be sharps, which can be flats. In German, it's Kreuze und Bs, sharps and flats. I need to change my order of notes and the basic root notes that I have so that I get a major scale if I start from D. So let's do it together. If I say, okay, I'd like to have a major scale beginning from D, there it is. I can't do it like that. As you hear, it doesn't sound bad, but it's not a major scale. It's actually a more kind of minor-based scale. In general, it's a Dorian scale. We're going to talk about church modes and the Ionian system in the advanced part of this workshop. I think it's next month, but not today. But Dorian mode is something special, and it always has to do with the semitones. But in this particular case, we would like to form a major scale starting from the D. That's why I need to raise some of the notes that we're going to hear. One octave higher. As you see, there are two black keys that come into play. It's F sharp, raising the F with a sharp to F sharp, and raising the C, again with a sharp, to C sharp. And the reason behind that is that we need to take a look at our whole tone and semitone steps, because we need to keep the structure of having the semitone steps between step 3 and 4 and 7 and 8. And that's why I need to raise the third step with a sharp. That's why we have F sharp. And again, the seventh step as well, leading us to C sharp. And I can do this from E, I can do this from A, I can also do this from a typical key that is more based on flats, like a B or let's say E flat. So the principle is always the same. We have to keep an eye on the role of the semitone steps. So let's take a look at the minor scale. This is the wrong one. Scales, there we are, minor scale. Minor scale is similar to the major scale, because if we still focus on the root tone series, we can build the minor scale as well with the white keys, equivalent to the major scale by white keys, and but we need to start from another note. We need to start from the note A, which is our new root tone or root note. And you can see that there is a different structure with regard to the semitones, because we have the semitones between step 2 and 3 and between step 5 and 6. So if we follow this structure, then we'll get the minor scale. Quick example, starting from the A. So as we can see, there they are, 2 and 3 and 5 and 6. And that's what's going on in the minor world. That's the natural scale for natural minor. Semitone steps between 2 and 3 and 5 and 6. And again, I can build this. Let's again take the note D. Important that we lower the 6th step by a flat. So we have a diminished B, which is B flat, flatted B. And that's important because we already said that there should be a semitone step between A and B between 5 and 6. And that's why we have to lower the 6th step in particular. So that's our two basic scales, the major scale and the minor scale. There are different options of scale that we're going to talk about in this workshop. But Now I thought about giving you some examples, some well-known songs, and we're going to take a closer look what's actually happening here. So the first example is by a band that most of you know. It's the Beatles. And the Beatles are really great for learning harmony theory because there's so much going on from beginner's level to really advanced level. Of course, today's workshop is about the basics of harmony theory. So I thought about, okay, I will pick the song Let It Be, parts of it, and we're going to talk about what's actually happening here. What it has to do with maybe our scales or chords that we're going to see. So let's give it a listen. Let It Be. All right, so this is a typical sequence of chords that really match each other, that suit each other. So to raise a question here, why do these chords actually work? Is there a hidden secret or something special in particular why these chords work the way I played it? And actually, yes, there are some things in harmony theory. And our circle of fifths, you may have heard about this before. Here it is. Our circle of fifths helps us to see why there are things working this way and why there is a relation between different keys and different functions. So let's take a look at this in particular. The circle of fifths is actually a tool that is built up in fifths. So what is a fifth in particular? A fifth is an interval. An interval is something that has nothing to do with a chord, but it's something like the basic structure of a chord, because a chord usually consists of 3 notes. That's when we talk about a chord. You can have 3 notes, 4 notes, 5 notes, maybe 20 notes, something like that. So you will have a chord. But an interval is something that consists of only 2 notes in particular. So you have 2 notes that are played simultaneously or played one after another one. So in this example, we have the interval fifth. And I give you an example. If we start again from our C and I go to our 5th step, then I have a perfect fifth. So this is my basic knowledge that I need to have to understand what's going on in the circle of fifths. So if I go up in fifths, starting from C, maybe let's start at the very low C. There's the first fifth. We're reaching the G, and again another fifth. We're reaching the D, the A, E, B, F sharp, C sharp, and so on. And you can see if you move clockwise, then we see, okay, the first fifth is the G, the D, the A, the E. So moving in fifths will lead us to the new key and a new note. And also there are some accidentals that come into play. So we have the first accidental on the sharp side. The first sharp comes into play if we are at the G. The second one comes into play if we reach the D, and so on. And usually we can do this forever, of course, but because of something which is called the enharmonic equivalence, we're going to talk about this in a nutshell. So we're going to talk about this soon. We usually reach until F sharp or G flat, because then the harmonic equivalence comes into play. So now we have the left side. The left side is also constructed. This is also a basic structure in fifths. So, but it's anti-clockwise. So if we start again, maybe from the high C, which is somewhere around there, I only have 49 keys, but I think it should be enough. So if we move down in fifths, then we'll see, all right, it's the same principle, but it's going anti-clockwise. And there is another accidental that comes into play. It's a B, a flat. In German it's a B, in English it's a flat. So, for example, F major has one flat, one B flat, and D minor is the same. So, coming back to the Beatles, our circle of fifths, I play it again. All right, so I played some chords. I played a C major chord, I played a G major chord, an A minor chord, and an F major chord. That's my basic structure of Let It Be, and I think it's used throughout the whole song, whether it's the chorus, whether it's the intro section, whether it's the verse. Of course, the arrangement differs a little bit, but it's basically consistent of all these four chords. So if we take a look at our circle of fifths, then we have the C major, the scale, as well as the chord. We have the G major that I played. We have A minor, and we have F major. So if I would draw something like a rectangle, like here, we can see, oh, there's something going on. That's interesting because they are related next to each other. They can be found next to each other in the circle of fifths, and the accidentals aren't that much because, for example, C sharp minor or A flat major does nothing have to do with what's going on here. So they are related to each other, and that's what's quite interesting here. So maybe we can take a look what's actually taking place. So once again, all right. So let's start the whole thing again from our C. C major is the basic key of this little tune. That being said, the reason behind is that the song always goes back to C major, and that's why we can say, okay, our root note, our root key in this particular case is our C major. And that's why we have a basis around C major. And our circle of fifths surprisingly starts with C major. So let's move on to the next chord, which is G major. I do play it in a little higher mode. So this is our G major, and we can see there are still no black keys going on. I'm still all with the white keys according to our root tone series. I also had A minor, which is here, and I also have F major. So all of them can be built up by using the root tone series, and they are all related to each other. In this particular case, I don't play it in its basic structure. I do play it by using inversions. But we're going to talk about this maybe later if there's enough time. If not, I'm going to cover this, of course, in the advanced workshop of this little topic. So here we are again. Now, what is the relation of Let It Be? First of all, we should talk about intervals. Our basic intervals, I already mentioned that the circle of fifths is all about fifths clockwise and anti-clockwise. And if we start from our C, then we have a perfect fifth reaching to the G. I can also use a major third, for example, from C to E, or I can use a major sixth. It's the same principle if we follow the root tone structure by the white keys, but of course that's not everything that is possible here. But from the perfect unison, which is the same note as our root tone, we can reach the octave, which is just doubling the frequency. For example, if you start at 100 Hertz and then you go to 200 Hertz, this would be the octave. It's doubling the frequency. And yeah, from second to third to fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh. This is, as I mentioned already, the typical structure of our basic intervals. We have two notes played simultaneously or one after another. So again, this would be my fifth. I can play it one after another, but I can also play it together. I could say, okay, let's go maybe for a major third. So I have my step 1 and my step 3, and this is the major third that I get. I can also say, okay, let's do it, let's take the 7th. So I have a major 7th, which is step 1 and step 7, played one after another one, or maybe together. So it's, why is it called the major 7th? Why is it called the major 3rd or the perfect 5th? This is because there are some other intervals going on, because some of them can be divided into major and minor intervals. So we can have the second as a major second, we can have it as well as a minor second. Same for the 3rd, same for the 6th, same for the 7th. So to give you an example, we have the, as we can see here in this little graph, we have the C, and the major second would be step 1 and step 2. By following the root tone series, we always have a major second here, talking about the white keys starting from the note C. So, if I change my second note, which is the D, by adding a flat, then I will have a D flat, which leads me to D flat, of course, and then I will have a minor second. It doesn't really sound that good, but it's often being used. For example, in Beethoven's Für Elise, the first 2 or 3 notes are played by minor seconds. This is just an example. Or maybe the very typical thirds, because they define whether it's major or minor key that I'm into. So we have the major third, or we have the minor third. So I really need to change my basic structure of the root notes, of the root tone series, by adding accidentals like flats or Bs, flats or sharps. So I can get the other notes, the other versions, the other intervals, like the small ones and the big ones, the major ones and the minor ones. And that's why I would have to change my major third by adding a flat again. So I will get C and E flat instead of C and E. This would be my major third, as we can see here. Major third, C and E. Minor third above C and E flat. And that's the big secret about the intervals. Of course, there are some exceptions as usual, but I think that's it for now. So we'll have enough to talk about in the second part of this little workshop today. Okay, so let's go for the chords then. As I mentioned before, we can say if we have 3 notes played simultaneously, then we have a typical chord. We can also say, okay, let's go for a tetrachord or a 7th chord, which consists of 4 chords, 4 notes. A 5-noted chord does consist of 5 notes, of course, and the cluster is something like that. sounds pretty weird, but it's often used in movie scores and classical music, and a cluster usually consists of many notes. But beginning from a section that consists of 3 notes, then we can say, okay, this is a typical chord, while an interval is only consistent of 2 notes played simultaneously or one after another one. So let's talk about triads. A triad structure is basically something like a snowman. A snowman, as you can see, consists of 3 different balls that you can form by adding some snow to it. And because it's winter time now, I think this is a good example. If we take this structure here, I think he's just missing the eyes and maybe the nose, but this could be a perfect snowman. So having 3 notes in this typical structure, this is a basic triad. So the root note, the 3rd and the 5th are the intervals that are relevant for our root note, for our basic structure of a triad. So if we start again from our root note, which is a G in this particular case, we can add a major or a minor 3rd and maybe a perfect 5th or even a diminished 5th or something like that. So we'll get this basic structure of the snowman of a triad. So to give you an example, this is a G major triad. We're starting from the G and then we add the major 3rd in this particular case, and we have the perfect 5th. And this is my structure that I have to build up and to come up with different triads. So of course there are many options that I can use. Here are some of them. We have major triads, we have minor triads, but also diminished and augmented triads. A major triad is basically consisting of the root note, the major 3rd and the perfect 5th, while the second one, the minor triad, is usually consisting of the root note, the minor triad, the minor 3rd and the perfect 5th again. So here we are. So again, compared to each other, the major triad, minor triad, but then we can have, and we can say, okay, let's bring this to another level. Let's add some more accidentals. For example, the diminished triad, we have to add another flat for our perfect 5th, which turns into a diminished 5th, and then we have a diminished triad. But we can also say, okay, let's add a sharp, for example. Let's take the major triad as a basic structure, and then we'll go to the sharp with adding it to the G. And here we are again. So we have 3 major 3rds in this particular case, and this would be an augmented triad. The chord symbols for it may be different depending on the country you live, of course. This is the typical German one, but I think it's also used on an international level. So it would be a C, or for example an A or an E, depending on your root note, of course. Adding a little M, a small m would be the minor version of it. Adding a circle would be the diminished one, and adding a plus icon, an add icon, would be the augmented version. Yeah, so here we are. Let's go back to our Beatles. So, we talked about chords and what's actually going on here. If we take another look at the circle of fifths, we'll see C, G, A minor and F, all major chords, the these three ones, they are something like related to each other, and they are listed here, especially in next to each other. If we take a look at the clockwise movement and the anti-clockwise movement. So what's the big secret around this? If we take our major scale that we talked about before, here's another look. So here it is again, the major scale consisting of different steps and differing notes, starting from C, ending with the C. If we take this to another level and build the so-called step triads, then we have for each step a different root note, for example the C, the D, the E, and then we have to take a look at the notes that are part of the major scale. For example, there is no F sharp, there also isn't a D flat, so it's just the white keys in this particular case. So let's go for an example with the step triads. Step triads in major, as you can see, again, this time with notes. We can see, okay, this is my C, D, E, F, G, A, B, and again the C in a higher octave. So, and I still use the step theory to relate this whole thing to each other, because we start from step 1 and we end with step 8, which is equal to our step 1. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 steps. And what I did here is I added a triad to each of these single notes. I added an E and an G, and I also added an F and an A to my second step. So I got a step triad which is D minor. And this has to be done by adding all the notes that are part of my scale. So I can't use an F sharp, or I can't use a D flat, because I really need to take a look, okay, where am I, which is my basic key, and it's still C major, so I have to take a look at the single notes that are being played of my C major scale, and then all results in this little basic sequence that we heard already, and all of them are part of the song Let It Be, because our first step, our fourth step, our fifth step, and also our sixth step, these are the ones that I played before, and they are used for our song Let It Be in this particular case. So of course there's a great emphasis going on with the first step, because this is our root tone, this is our root triad, if you will. Everything starts with this triad in particular, because if you have a song that's written in, let's say, C major, then it usually begins or ends in this particular key. It doesn't need to be like that, but in most cases the song at least ends in the basic key the song is written. So step 1, step 4, step 5 and step 6 in this particular case. So again, all right, there we are. So these are the step triads to help us a little bit, okay, why do these chords match that well to each other? It's because there is a relation if we take a scale like the C major scale, and each of these chords being used is part of this scale if we form and if we build the so-called step triads. And that's the big secret behind Let It Be. That's the big secret because, or why this, it sounds like that, because they are related to each other and also next to each other in the circle of fifths, and there we have it. So another one is It has to do with this particular case, but it's something that also happens in general. As you can see, the circle of fifths, there is an outline, an outer section and an inner section. The outer section is consisting of the root keys, for example, C, G, D, F, B flat, whatever, if we move in fifths. And the inner section, these are the so-called relative keys to our outer section. So each key that is listed here, it's the G or the D, has a relative key. And therefore there is a special kind of relation why A minor suits C major or why E minor suits G major. And there is a little secret behind this, why this is happening. And the secret or the mystery or whatever is that there is a direct relation. If we start again from our C and move to the sixth step, then we will get the relative minor, the relative key for our C major. If we are in C major, then we move to the sixth step and we will get A minor, because the notes being played are the same, but the structure of the sequence is changing because we start from the A and of course we finish with the A. But it's the same notes that has been played or that are listed in the major scale, but the order is different. And also the semitone steps again, because we said, okay, let's have the major scale. There are semitone steps between 3 and 4 and 7 and 8, which is here and which is also here. But if we change the order and start from the A, from the sixth step of our C major scale, then the order of the semitone steps changes, and we have semitones between 2 and 3 and 5 and 6. And that's what builds up the typical minor scale. So there's a relation. If we have any major scale, we can move to the sixth step, and then we can form the appropriate minor scale. To give you an example, let's do it, for example, from G. So if I say, okay, my G major scale consists of 8 tones, obviously, 8 notes. Again. 1, 2, 3, 4. And 7, 8. I had to raise the F to F sharp to get the semitone step between step 7 and step 8. So again, some accidental comes into play. Okay, let's move to the sixth step. Let's see what happens. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We reach the note E. Let's start the whole thing by still using the same accidentals and the same role of the semitone steps that I had before. Let's see what we get. Again. All right, so as you can see, it's the same notes played in a different kind of way because I started with the E instead of the G, but the amount of notes and the accidentals and the semitone steps are the same, but the basic structure is a little bit different. And that's why there is a relative key from any or for any major scale, for any major key, and vice versa. You can also say, okay, what happens if I start with a minor scale? That's no problem, but you keep an eye on the role of the notes and its structure. And if I start, for example, with A, I need to know that the relative major scale of my minor key is starting from the third step in this particular case. So if I start with A minor, I move to the third step and then I got the relative key, which is C major. C major and A minor share the same notes, they share the same accidentals. Actually, there aren't any accidentals, no sharps, no flats, but that's because of the same notes and its structure. But as mentioned before, you gotta keep an eye on the role of the semitone steps and where you can find them. So from this on, you can say, okay, I'm really able to build up each and every key and also its relative keys. And that's what's actually important if we talk about the circle of fifths that we have here and why there is a relative key for each basic key like C, G, D, A, or vice versa. If you say, okay, I got F minor, I got C minor, and there's a relative major key. And that's what we really should keep in mind if we, let's say, analyze things, or also for composing songs, because your variety gets bigger and bigger if you keep all this stuff in mind. And yeah, that's basically it. What's happening here with the Beatles. If I start with C major, and if I play G major or F major, it really fits the song because G major and F major are related to C major. They are close to each other. They are part of the step triad theory. They are all part of the different steps of my C major scale. And also A minor is the relative key, which is also called the submediant to my basic key, which is C major. So I can play A minor and it will always work. So let's take it to another level and change this arrangement a little bit. Or for example, if I start in A minor, it works because all of them are related to each other. So that's some little things that are going on here. Of course, we can also talk about functional theory and give all of these steps and structures different names, but that's what we're going to do in the second part of this little workshop. So another example is something like, let's say, how about some Billie Eilish? I think Billie Eilish and her brother, they're doing an amazing job when it comes to songwriting, but also productions. And there's a lot of things that is going on in their songs. And usually it works because they really know what they're doing. So if we take the song, let's take Bad Guy. I think it was her first real single and video back then, some years ago. Bad Guy. There are some melodic structures and some intervals and some chords going on to form the whole thing, but I think there are two sequences and two motifs that really got stuck in your head if you listen to the song too much. At least that's what happens to me when I do it. So Billie Eilish, Bad Guy. There's a little sequence that goes like that. All right, so if we take a look at this little section, what's actually going on here, we can say, okay, this has nothing to do with our root tone series with regard to the white keys because I played some of the black keys. So maybe it's a different key, it's not C major and it's not A minor. I started with G and I actually played a minor third. I didn't play the major one because this would be part of our root tone series. Sounds kind of funny, but that's not what it's all about here in this particular case. So we have a minor third. And then it goes up. If we go up a perfect fourth this time from the G to the C, and we have it again, and then a major second, then we reach the D. So we have G, we have C, and we have D. Let me give you a little example. If we take the G minor scale, we gotta keep in mind that there are semitone steps, obviously, and they have to be between step 2 and 3, but also 5 and 6. So if I build up the G minor scale, which is what I do now, okay, then we have two accidentals, two flats. First one is the B flat, and the second one is the E flat. Because I need to change these notes to match my basic minor scale structure. So again, Billie Eilish's motive. Something like that. So, and if we take a look at this, we can see, okay, it really matches the G major scale instead of one little note, because we have an F sharp, and this is obviously not a part of our G major scale. Because what Billie Eilish is using here, they're using the F sharp instead of the F. And that's something cool because it differs from the typical minor scale. It's an extension, it's something else that has to do with the natural minor scale, but it's a different one. So there it is, the natural minor scale again, this time beginning from the note A and ending with the note A, just to see, okay, there are semitone steps between 2 and 3 and 5 and 6. But if we say, okay, what happens if we raise one of these steps like Billie Eilish did? Let's take the 7th step. So we add a sharp to it. So let's see what happens. And then all by a sudden we got, it's 3 semitone steps. So we have a semitone step between 2 and 3, between 5 and 6, and 7 and 8, almost like our major scale. And this sounds kinda Arabian, it really sounds different. So back to Billie Eilish. They are in a different key, they are in G minor key, but it doesn't matter because the structure and the principle is the same one. They are using the harmonic minor scale, which is this one, for their song Bad Guy, for this particular sequence. So once again, the G harmonic minor scale. So and that's where our F sharp comes into play in this particular case. Let's add some chords to it. That's not what they did, but I think it's some kind of example to see, okay, that's what he's talking about. We have a G minor, we get a C minor, and then we have, because of the harmonic, of the minor harmonic scale, we get a D major. And the D major is obviously not part of our basic structure when it comes to a G minor scale, but if we use the harmonic minor scale of G minor, then we get this D major chord instead of the one that's usually being played. So Billie Eilish is using Harmonic Minor. This is one of the first, this is the first sequence, and the other one that I would like to talk about there's a little melody section, I think about maybe 30 or 40 seconds after the song really got into the tempo. This little melody section is using another thing. Because again, if we say, all right, let's take a look at our minor scale. We also talked about the harmonic minor scale that's being used by raising the 7th step by a sharp. But if we take a look at this little section, I can see, oh, there is a C sharp. Where the hell do they take the C sharp? So it almost has some bluesy vibe, some bluesy character, because if I do play the typical blues scale, and this time, or in this special case, they decided, okay, let's take the perfect fifth that we had in the first section and add a flat to it. So we get a so-called flatted fifth, a blue note, and then we have this special kind of blues vibe or whatever. And they did the same when they went up to the C minor. But in this case, we already had the F sharp that's being played here, because it's part of our harmonic minor scale for the note G. So, and they decided to just add another flat or a sharp, depending on the actual road of the root notes. But that's what's going on with Billie Eilish's Bad Guy. So we have intervals, we have thirds, we have perfect fifths that are being changed into a flatted fifth. They don't use the G harmonic scale all the time. They switch to G, they don't use the G natural minor scale all the time. They switch to G harmonic minor, and I think it's pretty cool. It's basically kind of easy if you listen to it, but if you reflect on what's going on here, you can see, all right, there are some extra add-ons and some things being used that make it sound more interesting for us. And yeah, that's a little bit about Billie Eilish in general, what they did here and what they are using for their music. All right, I think there are 2 minutes left. So yeah, let's talk about another minor scale, another option to form the minor scale. And this is the so-called melodic minor. The melodic minor is similar to harmonic minor. It's kind of different because instead of only raising the 7th step, we also raise the 6th step. So you can see it like there. We have the 6th step, which is usually an F, but then we raise it by adding another sharp, and we get an F sharp, but also the G sharp that comes from our from our harmonic minor scale. So let's hear it. It sounds like that. From a classical point of view, if you play it starting from the root note, ending an octave higher, you can do it like that, But if you play it vice versa, you should use the natural minor scale, because this is something that, something like a standard. That if you do it in the upward movement and downward, we usually go back. You don't need to do it like that every time, but it's something that has become a standard in classical music. So, all three minor scales together. Natural minor, harmonic minor, and last but not least, resolving in the natural minor. So you can use all of these scales. There are a lot more scales, of course, also in the world of minor, especially if we add church modes or the Arabian scale. But that's something that we are going to cover in another workshop. So yeah, that was something about the basics of harmony theory. There's a lot more that we can talk about, and I'm going to do this in the second section of this little workshop today, available for HOFA students. And yeah, so let's see you all in a while. Thanks for watching so far.